Deep in the heart of the sundered peaks, where ancient mountains scraped the bellies of the clouds and rivers ran with the melted starlight of millennia, lay the Whisperwood. It wasn't just a forest. It was a living, breathing entity, its canopy a vast emerald lung that inhaled mist and exhaled magic. For as long as memory stretched, the people of Ethel had lived nestled within its boughs, their homes carved into the colossal trunks of sentient trees, their lives woven into the forest's own slow, majestic rhythm. Elara was a child of the Whisperwood, born under a canopy of luminous moss that glowed like fallen constellations. Her hair, the color of polished oak leaves, often held tiny specks of the forest's shimmering pollen. And her eyes, the deep green of moss in shadow, seemed to drink in the light and secrets of the woods. She was 10 years old, a whisper of a girl, but her heart beat with the ancient pulse of the forest. Every morning, Elara would wake to the soft, sifting sound of the Whisperwood. It wasn't just the rustle of leaves or the sigh of the wind, it was Gwai the whispering. A gentle, continuous murmur that flowed through the roots, climbed the trunks and danced through the leaves, carrying the thoughts, memories and dreams of the forest. Most people in Ethel heard it as a soothing background hum, a comforting presence. But Elara heard more. She heard the individual worries of a young sapling thirsting for sunlight, the joyful trill of a bloom unfurling its petals, the slow, contented thrum of an ancient elder tree dreaming of seasons long past. Her home, like all in Ethel, was a marvel of nature and gentle craftsmanship. It was a hollow within the trunk of a great maple giant, its smooth silver-gray bark spiraling upwards like a natural staircase. Inside, the walls were polished wood, warm and fragrant, with shelves carved directly from the living timber. Lumina moths, fat and iridescent, clustered in glass jars, their soft light illuminating Elara's collection of smooth river stones, dried flower petals, and feathers dropped by rare sky drakes. Her bed was a nest of woven moss and thistledown, so soft it felt like sleeping on a cloud. Today, however, the whispering felt different. As Elara stretched, a curious prickle ran down her spine. The usual harmonious chorus of the forest was subtly out of tune, like a beloved song played with a single jarring note. It was a faint, almost imperceptible dissonance, yet to Elara, it was as clear as the chiming of the sunbells that marked midday. "Morning, Finbal," she murmured, pushing aside the woven curtain to her sleeping nook. A tiny creature, no bigger than her thumb, uncurled itself from the crook of a carved wooden owl perched on her windowsill. Finbal wasn't truly an insect. He was a glowworm, but one of a special lineage. His body pulsed with a soft azure light, and his antennae twitched with an intelligence far beyond that of a common grub. He was Elara's steadfast companion, her silent confidant. Finbal's light flickered, a rapid, agitated pulse. "A concern. I hear. Sanshare. Disturbance. Forest, speak broken." His thoughts, direct and wordless, flowed into Elara's mind, a connection as old as her memory. "You feel it too, don't you?" Elara whispered, padding to the window. The window wasn't glass, but a translucent membrane spun by moon spiders, through which the vibrant greens and dappled light of the Whisperwood were perfectly clear. "It's quieter somehow, and yet louder in its stillness." Finbal nodded his tiny head, his azure glow dimming slightly, conveying a sense of unease. He crawled onto Elara's shoulder, his small weight a familiar comfort. Breakfast was a simple affair in Ethel, warm berry paste made from sun-drenched sunberries, and sweet dewdrop nectar collected from the heart of night-blooming orchids. Elara ate with her grandmother, Lyra, whose face was a map of gentle wrinkles, each one a story, etched by time and wisdom. Lyra's hair was the color of winter snow, braided with dried flowers and ancient forest charms. She, too, was a listener, though her connection to the whispering had mellowed with age, becoming more a deep understanding than a direct conversation. "The wind carries a different song today, doesn't it, little sprout?" Lyra said, her voice soft as the rustle of leaves. She watched Elara with knowing eyes. Elara nodded, pushing a berry around her bowl. "It feels anxious, grandmother, like a great beast stirring from a long sleep, but not in a good way." Lyra sighed, a sound like autumn leaves settling. "The forest has its moods, child, but this feels deeper than a mood. The roots speak of a chill, a creeping silence where there should be life." She paused, her gaze drifting towards the window, where the morning light filtered through the dense canopy. The whispering is the voice of life itself in these woods. When it falters, so too does the forest's heart. Elara felt a knot tighten in her stomach. The Whisperwood wasn't just their home. It was their protector, their provider, their very being. Without its harmony, Ethel would be nothing. What could cause it, grandmother? Elara asked, her voice barely a murmur. Lyra shook her head slowly. I do not know, little one. The oldest legends speak of the stillness as a time when the forest's voice was silenced by a great sorrow or a terrible blight. But those are only stories, whispered from one generation to the next, to warn us against disrespecting the woods. After breakfast, Elara felt an irresistible pull towards the forest's depths. The whispering was a faint, insistent thrum in her mind, like a distant drumbeat urging her onward. She slipped out of her home, Thimble clinging to her shoulder, his glow light a beacon against the dappled shadows. The village of Ethel was a wonderland of organic architecture. Homes spiraled up trees, connected by bridges of woven vines, or nestled in hollows at the base of colossal trunks. Paths of smooth, packed earth wound through glowing fungi and beds of sweet-scented night blooms. Children with leaf-green tunics chased luminomoths, their laughter like bells. But today, even the usual joyful sounds seemed muted, overshadowed by the strange quietude of the forest. Elara ventured beyond the familiar paths, deeper into the ancient heart of the Whisperwood. The air grew thicker, rich with the scent of damp earth and blooming moss. Trees here were truly ancient, their trunks wider than many houses, their branches reaching for the sky like gnarled arms. Their bark was etched with symbols and patterns that told stories of forgotten ages, stories only the most sensitive listeners could decipher. Thimble's light pulsed with increasing frequency. In deeper doubt, can't see on she. Wrongness. Nanden. Source ahead. Honey near, Kimwanani, we wasn't out, echt, candy. One in down at hands. I wish start hemians, hamorti. I see young man see. The whispering here was more intense, a swirling current of anxiety that pressed against Elara's mind. Individual whispers were harder to distinguish, drowned out by a collective hum of distress. She heard the silent pleas of root systems struggling, the faint cries of moss sprites feeling their homes wither, the deep guttural groans of the ancient trees themselves. She followed a faint, almost imperceptible path, one known only to the forest's creatures and the keenest listeners. It led her past the glimmering falls, where water cascaded over moss-covered stones, catching the light in 1,000 sparkling diamonds. Today, the falls seemed duller, the water less vibrant. The air around them felt heavy, stagnant. Then she saw it. A clearing she knew well, the sunken glade, usually a vibrant tapestry of glowing flowers and playful sprites, was shrouded in an unnatural pallor. The ground was dry, cracked, and the usually iridescent moss was brittle and brown. The flowers, once bursting with color, hung limp and gray, their petals shriveled. The air was still, heavy, and silent. Utterly silent. The silence was the most terrifying part. Here, in the heart of the Whisperwood, there should be a symphony of life. The buzz of pollen bees, the chirping of tree frogs, the rustle of tiny creatures. But there was nothing. No sounds, no whispers, no hum of life. It was as if the forest itself had held its breath and forgotten to exhale. Thimble clung to Elara's ear, his light a frantic, blinding flash. Way death touch. Unnatural. Silencia. Undenidi. Dana. Elara knelt, her fingers brushing the brittle remnants of a once vibrant bloomheart. The plant crumbled to dust at her touch. A wave of sorrow, sharp and cold, washed over her from the whispering. The collective grief of the surrounding trees, witnessing the death of this vital glade, was almost unbearable. This was no natural blight. The very essence of the glade had been stolen, its life force drained away. The silence wasn't just an absence of sound, it was an active force, a void where the forest's voice should be. She looked up at the surrounding trees. Their leaves, though still green higher up, were tinged with a sickly yellow near the glade. Their branches, usually vibrant with moss and lichen, were bare and skeletal in places. A deep, resonant thrum of pain emanated from their ancient roots, a collective cry of agony that Elara felt deep in her bones. One tree, a venerable oak sentinel that had stood guard over the sunken glade for centuries, looked particularly ravaged. Its lowest branches were completely bare, its bark cracked and peeling. As Elara approached, she heard its whisper, weak and barely audible, a desperate rasp in her mind. Help, silence, spreading, deep, root, heart, heart. The whisper faded into a barely discernible hum. Elara pressed her palm against the rough bark, trying to send comfort, to listen deeper. The tree's pain was immense, its voice almost extinguished. But as she focused, straining her connection, she felt a subtle shift. Not from the tree itself, but from underneath it. A faint, lingering echo of something else. Something cold, something alien, something that didn't belong to the vibrant tapestry of the whisperwood. It felt like a deep, insidious chill, burrowing into the earth. Thimble, sensing her focus, nudged her ear. Antun, non tuiri, intathi, ise, kestekina. Under tea. Deep dit. Any. One. Elara looked down. At the base of the oak sentinel, half hidden by a tangle of withered roots, she saw a faint indentation in the dried earth. It wasn't a natural burrow, nor a creature's den. It was a deliberate opening, almost perfectly circular, barely wide enough for her to squeeze through. A faint, almost imperceptible shimmer of unnatural darkness emanated from within. The whispering around her intensified, a chorus of warnings and pleas, urging her both to retreat and to investigate. The urgency in the forest's voice was palpable, a desperate plea for understanding, for intervention. This wasn't just a dying glade. It was a wound, a festering darkness spreading into the heart of the whisperwood. And it led down into the earth, into places unknown. Elara knew with a certainty that settled deep in her soul, that the answer to the forest's failing voice lay within that dark opening. The silence had a source, and it was calling to her. Taking a deep breath, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and fierce determination, Elara squeezed her small frame through the opening, Fimbul's azure light bobbing ahead, illuminating the tight, earthen tunnel that stretched into the unknown depths beneath the ancient whisperwood. The silence from above was absolute, but the distant, distressed murmurs of the forest still echoed in her mind, urging her on. The air grew heavy and cool, tasting of rich, damp earth and something else, something ancient and forgotten, like dust motes dancing in sunbeams that had never touched the light. Fimbul's azure aglow, usually a bright, steady beacon, seemed to pulse now, casting long, dancing shadows that stretched and shrank with every step Elara took. The tunnel was narrow, forcing her to stoop, her fingers brushing against slick, unyielding rock on one side and a tangled mass of roots, thick as her arm, on the other. These roots, gnarled and dark, seemed to writhe and coil, a subterranean network of the very forest she had left behind, now silent above her. With each shuffle deeper, the faint, psychic echo of the whisperwood's pain receded, replaced by an even more profound quiet. It wasn't the gentle quiet of a sleeping glade, but a deep, resonant silence that pressed in on her, making her own breathing sound impossibly loud. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drum in the subterranean stillness. She tightened her grip on Fimbul, feeling the tiny sprite's warmth against her palm, a comforting anchor in the encroaching mystery. Minutes blurred into what felt like hours. The tunnel twisted and turned, sometimes dipping sharply, sometimes rising in a slow, winding ascent. The roots began to thin out, replaced by smooth, almost polished stone, veined with faint, shimmering lines that caught Fimbul's light and returned it in fleeting flashes of silver and gold. These veins weren't mere minerals. They hummed with a subtle, latent energy, a whisper of magic that seemed to sleep beneath the earth. Then the tunnel opened. Elara gasped, not with fear, but with breathtaking wonder. They stood on a narrow ledge overlooking an immense cavern, so vast that Fimbul's light could not reach its distant walls or ceiling. Below them, a shimmering, phosphorescent lake stretched into the gloom, its surface like polished obsidian, reflecting the faint ethereal glow of strange flora that clung to the cavern walls. Giant bioluminescent mushrooms, some taller than Elara herself, dotted the landscape, their caps glowing with soft, otherworldly hues of violet, emerald, and cerulean. From their gills, a fine glittering dust drifted like slow-motion snow, settling on the smooth, dark rock and the silent, still water. The air here was different again, cool and sweet, smelling of ozone and crushed petals, with an undertone of something wild and untamed. The silence, though still deep, was now laced with the faint, rhythmic drip of water from unseen stalactites, and a soft, almost imperceptible hum that vibrated through the very stone beneath her feet. It was the hum of living magic, ancient and powerful. "Thimble," Ilara whispered, her voice a tiny thread in the vast space. The sprite pulsed, its light momentarily flaring with excitement, acknowledging the wonder of the place. The ledge wound down into the cavern, a natural path carved by millennia of water and wind. As they descended, the giant mushrooms grew more numerous, their light creating a surreal, dreamlike landscape. Ilara noticed something else. Embedded in the cavern walls, half hidden by clinging moss and glowing fungi, were intricate carvings. They depicted swirling patterns, celestial maps, and figures that seemed to be part tree, part human, their limbs reaching towards a central, radiating sun. These were not the crude markings of simple folk, but the sophisticated artistry of a civilization long past, one deeply connected to the earth and the stars. Who made this place? Ilara wondered aloud, tracing the smooth lines of a carving with her finger. As she touched the stone, a faint warmth spread through her fingertips, and a fleeting image flickered in her mind. Tall, slender beings with bark-like skin and eyes like twilight stars, moving with slow, deliberate grace, tending to glowing crystals. The image vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving her with a sense of profound longing for a time she had never known. They reached the floor of the cavern, the air growing warmer, the hum more pronounced. The phosphorescent lake was closer now, its surface perfectly still, revealing no secrets. But as Ilara approached its edge, Thimble darted ahead, its light flickering rapidly, pulling her gaze to a section of the lake that was knotty still. In the very center of the vast lake, a disturbance rippled outwards. Not a natural current, but something else. It was as if the water itself was in distress, swirling slowly, creating a dark vortex that seemed to drink the light from the glowing mushrooms around it. And from this vortex, a new sound began to emanate, faint at first, then growing stronger, a deep, resonating thrum, like the slow, labored beat of an immense, weary heart. The thrum vibrated through Ilara's bones, a deep, sorrowful note that resonated with the distant memory of the forest's distress. This was it. This was the source. Carefully, Ilara stepped closer to the edge of the lake. The water here was not cold, but strangely warm, almost tepid. The swirling vortex was dark, impossibly deep, and as she peered into its murky depths, she saw flashes of faint, sickly green light pulsing from within. It was a light that seemed to suck the warmth from Thimble's azure glow, making the little sprite dim slightly in its presence. Suddenly, a massive root, thicker than a tree trunk, surfaced from the vortex, breaking the water's surface with a soft plop. It was not a normal root. It was dark, almost black, and pulsed faintly with the same sickly green light Ilara had seen in the water. It looked diseased, corrupted, and as it slowly twisted, more roots, equally dark and pulsing, began to rise, coiling and writhing like a nest of enormous subterranean serpents. They were the roots of the Whisperwood. But they were no longer vibrant and alive. They were sick, tainted, and drawing power from something deep within the vortex. "What's happening?" Ilara whispered, a chill creeping up her spine that had nothing to do with the cavern's temperature. Thimble, usually so playful, now hovered close to Ilara's shoulder, its light dim and flickering with what Ilara could only interpret as distress. Its tiny form shivered. As the roots continued to emerge, forming a grotesque, writhing mound in the center of the lake, the thrumming grew louder, more insistent, and more painful. The sickly green light from the vortex intensified, casting an eerie glow on the cavern walls, making the previously enchanting glowing fungi look dim and frail. Ilara knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her soul, that this was the heart of the Whisperwood's suffering. Something was infecting its very roots, drawing its life force, twisting its ancient magic into something dark and destructive. She looked around the cavern, searching for answers, for help. The ancient carvings on the walls seemed to stare back at her with silent, knowing eyes. The beautiful glowing mushrooms now seemed to wilt slightly in the presence of the green light. The air grew heavier, thick with an almost tangible sense of decay. Then, from the depths of the swirling vortex, as the corrupted roots writhed and tightened their grip, a new shape began to emerge. It was slow, deliberate, and vast. First, a colossal, dark stone structure, angular and unnatural, broke the surface of the water. It was not carved, but seemed to have grown from the very rock, imbued with the same sickly green glow that pulsed from the roots. It was a monolith, jagged and imposing like a shard of night. As it rose, more of it became visible, a complex array of conduits and channels, etched into its surface, through which the green light pulsed and flowed, like blood through veins. This was no natural formation. This was a machine, a terrible, ancient device, built for a single, dark purpose. The monolith continued to rise, revealing more of its terrifying scale. It was crowned with a single immense crystal, jagged and dark green, that pulsed with an agonizing rhythmic brilliance. This crystal was the heart of the machine, and it was drawing energy from the earth, from the very roots of the whisperwood, and channeling it elsewhere. Elara felt a sudden sharp pain in her own chest, as if her heart was being squeezed. It was the pain of the whisperwood, amplified, focused, and overwhelming. The forest wasn't just distressed, it was being actively drained, its life force siphoned away by this monstrous device. A siphoner, she whispered, the word echoing strangely in the vast space. She had heard tales of such things in her grandmother's stories, ancient magical machines built by forgotten peoples, capable of drawing immense power from the land, often with disastrous consequences. But she had always thought them mere legends. The monolith finally stopped rising, towering high above the surface of the lake, its dark green crystal throbbing with malevolent energy. The corrupted roots of the whisperwood were now fully entangled with its base, like monstrous tendrils feeding an even more monstrous parasite. The silent hum in the cavern had transformed into a low, guttural growl, emanating directly from the monolith itself. Fimble let out a faint, high-pitched whimper, shrinking behind Elara's ear. Suddenly, the green light from the crystal flared, casting stark, emerald shadows across the cavern. A new sound filled the air, a low, melodic chanting, ethereal and haunting, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It wasn't human, nor animal, but something ancient, alien, and deeply unsettling. Elara looked around, her heart leaping into her throat. She saw them then, emerging from the shadows of the farthest cavern walls, figures moving with slow, deliberate grace. They were tall and slender, not unlike the beings she had glimpsed in the ancient carvings, but these were twisted, shadowy mockeries of that beauty. Their skin was pale, almost translucent, stretched taut over skeletal frames. Their eyes glowed with the same sickly green light as the monolith's crystal, and their forms seemed to shimmer and waver at the edges, as if they were not entirely of this world. They were cloaked in tattered, dark robes that seemed to absorb the light, and in their hands, they clutched staffs topped with smaller dark green crystals that pulsed in unison with the monolith. As they moved, their bare feet made no sound on the cavern floor. They were chanting, their voices forming the unsettling melody that echoed through the vast space, feeding the siphoner with their dark magic. These were the guardians, or perhaps the masters, of the siphoner. They were the source of the silence that had first drawn Elara down into the earth, a silence created by the absorption of all natural magic, all natural sound, into their terrible device. There were perhaps a dozen of them, forming a silent circle around the monolithic siphoner, their chants growing in intensity. As they chanted, the green light around the siphoner pulsed faster, and Elara could feel the very ground beneath her feet tremble. The pain in her chest intensified, a searing ache that matched the agony of the whisperwood. She had to do something. But what? She was just a small girl with a tiny light sprite, facing an ancient magical machine and a circle of shadowy, powerful beings. One of the robed figures, taller and more imposing than the others, turned its head slowly. Its glowing green eyes, devoid of pupils, fixed directly on Elara. A chill colder than any ice spread through her veins. It raised a long, bony finger, pointing directly at her. The chanting stopped abruptly. The cavern fell into a silence so profound it roared in Elara's ears. The creature's voice, when it spoke, was a dry, rustling whisper, like dead leaves skittering across stone. It echoed strangely in the cavern, devoid of any warmth or emotion. A small spark, from the surface. How unexpected. Elara gripped Fimble tighter, trying to project courage she didn't feel. Fimble's azure light, though dim, still pulsed, a defiant beacon against the encroaching green. You are hurting the Whisperwood, Elara managed to say, her voice shaking but resolute. The creature's head tilted, a gesture that was both ancient and unnerving. Hurting? No, child. We merely borrow. The forest has grown too wild, too potent. Its magic strays beyond its bounds. We merely bring it back in balance. Balance? Elara scoffed, a spark of anger cutting through her fear. You're stealing its life. You're making it sick. The creature took a slow, deliberate step towards her, its companions remaining motionless, their green eyes fixed on Elara. Ignorant child. The forest magic. It belongs to us. We, the children of the deep, are its true inheritors. It is our right to guide its power, to use it for our own purposes. Elara remembered the faint, distressed murmurs of the forest in her mind. This was no balance. This was tyranny. You're wrong, she said, her voice gaining strength. The Whisperwood belongs to itself. It gives freely, it doesn't need to be stolen from. The creature's glowing eyes narrowed, and a low, dry chuckle, devoid of humor, emanated from its cloaked form. Such youthful defiance, such purity, a tempting morsel for the siphoner's hunger. It raised its staff, its crystal glowing brighter, and the air around Elara crackled with a cold, oppressive energy. The other children of the deep raised their staffs in unison, their chanting resuming, but this time, it was faster, more urgent, and directed at her. Elara felt the magical pressure building, pressing in on her, threatening to crush her. Fimble pulsed wildly, its light struggling against the oppressive green. She knew instinctively that they were trying to drain her, just as they were draining the Whisperwood. She had stumbled not just upon the source of the Whisperwood's illness, but upon its ancient shadowy masters who sought to harness its power for their own dark ends. Elara was now trapped, deep beneath the earth, facing an impossible task. The Whisperwood's fate, and perhaps her own, hung precariously in the balance. But she wouldn't give up. Not while Fimble still shone, and not while the forest still whispered its faint plea for help in her heart. She squeezed her eyes shut, concentrating, trying to find a way anyway, to fight back against the encroaching darkness. She squeezed her eyes shut, concentrating, trying to find a way, anyway, to fight back against the encroaching darkness. When Elara opened them again, the world was a canvas of oppressive black. The faint, comforting glow of Fimble, usually a vibrant pulse of emerald light, was now a mere hesitant spark against the overwhelming gloom. She lay not on rough earth, but suspended, her body feeling strangely weightless yet utterly bound. It was as if she were trapped in a cocoon woven from shadow itself, an invisible shroud that pressed not upon her flesh, but upon her very spirit, stifling her breath and silencing the natural hum of magic within her. A profound chill permeated the air, a cold that seeped into her bones, not like winter frost, but like the emptiness of forgotten aeons. The air tasted of damp stone and something else, something metallic and ancient, like the scent of old blood mingled with powdered moonrock. There was no sound, only an abyssal silence that swallowed even the echo of her own heartbeat. Then, a voice. Not spoken aloud, but a thought, vast and cold, unfurling within her mind like a frost-blighted scroll. Welcome, child of the verdant surface. Your forest has sung its last lullaby. Inyoni. Elara tried to struggle, to summon even a flicker of the Whisperwood's life-giving energy, but the shadowy bonds held firm. It wasn't a physical restraint. Rather, it was as if her own magical essence had been siphoned, leaving her raw and vulnerable. Fimble pulsed weakly, its light flickering, a tiny defiant beacon in the crushing dark. She focused on it, on the warmth, the memory of sunlight filtering through ancient leaves, of dew-kissed moss, and the rustle of unseen creatures. Another thought, this one laced with a chilling amusement. Your little spark is quaint. Oh. But a single ember cannot ignite a drowned forest. From the depths of the cavern, vast and unseen, emerged formless presences. They weren't solid, not truly, but were vortices of deeper darkness, shifts in the fabric of the oppressive gloom. These were the chthonic sovereigns, the ancient, shadowy masters of this realm. They had no eyes, no mouths, yet Elara felt their gaze, their cold amusement, their immense patient hunger. They weren't merely seeking to harness the whisperwood, they sought to deconsume it, to drain its vibrant life force to fuel their own stagnant, decaying power. She felt the whisperwood then, not as a whisper in her heart, but as a throbbing ache. It was a pain that echoed her own, a vast collective agony of roots shriveling, leaves blackening, and the ancient spirits of the trees crying out in a silent, desperate chorus. She saw, in a flash of mental imagery, the vibrant green fading to a sickly gray, the air growing heavy and still, the very ground cracking as if parched by a sun that had never truly shone. The whisperwood, her home, her sanctuary, was dying. Rage, cold and pure, ignited within her. "You will not have it." Her voice, though a mere whisper against the vast silence, felt like a thunderclap in her own ears. "The whisperwood will not fall." The shadowy presences seemed to ripple, a silent, mocking laughter echoing in her mind. "Hezuch, fierce defiance, little seedling. It changes nothing. Your forest is but a wellspring for our awakening. Its essence shall nourish the great slumberer, and when it rises, this world, and all worlds, shall know true night." Elara pushed against the invisible bonds, this time with a focused intent, not just with brute force, but with the memory of the whisperwood's resilience. She pictured its roots, deep and unyielding, threading through rock and soil, finding sustenance even in the harshest conditions. She imagined the ancient oaks, weathering storms, standing tall against time. And she remembered the small, persistent shoots of life that always found a way to break through concrete, to reclaim what was theirs. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through her. It wasn't a physical vibration, but a subtle hum in her very core. Thimble, sensing her renewed resolve, flared brighter for a moment, its emerald glow pushing back the immediate surrounding darkness, creating a small, shimmering sphere around her. The sovereign sneered. "Your magic is but a trickle here. We have woven this prison from the very essence of forgotten light. It will starve you, slowly, until you yield." But Elara wouldn't yield. She closed her eyes again, not in despair, but in concentration. She couldn't draw on the forest power directly, not yet. But she could draw on her own connection to it, the deep, resonant bond that had been forged over a lifetime. She focused on the feeling of her bare feet on cool earth, of the wind rustling through her hair, of the vibrant sap pulsing through a living tree. She imagined herself as a seed, buried deep, but not defeated. A seed holding the promise of a mighty tree. Slowly, painstakingly, a faint golden green light began to emanate from her own chest, swirling gently around Fimble's brighter spark. It was a warmth, a subtle counterpressure against the icy grip of the shadows. It was the magic of life, small and fragile, but persistent. The sovereigns seemed to hesitate, their formless shapes wavering for a fraction of a second, an echo of surprise rippling through their cold consciousness. Impossible, they thought, a hint of something akin to irritation in their telepathic voice. "Guiding is absolute. Inum tu winti. Pantaunia." Elara pushed harder. She felt a connection, a faint, almost imperceptible thread, not to the whisperwood above, but to the very earth beneath her. This wasn't the living soil of the forest, but the ancient, mineral-rich bedrock, the deep, silent heart of the world. Even here, in the realm of shadow, there was an underlying pulse of primordial energy. It was raw, unrefined, but it was vithere. She reached for it, not with her hands but with her spirit, her intention. She imagined her own essence as roots, not fragile, but strong and seeking, pushing through the oppressive darkness, searching for any vein of life, any forgotten spring of magic. The golden green light around her intensified, a soft halo against the crushing black. The invisible bonds that held her felt less like solid restraints, and more like intricate woven spells. They were designed to suppress, to siphon, but perhaps not to contain absolute, unyielding will. Fimble vibrated with renewed vigor, its light now a steady, warm emerald. It was a small comfort, but a potent one. It was a reminder that even in the deepest night, light could persist. And it was then that Elara noticed something else, something Fimble seemed to be subtly highlighting. The shadows that formed her prison were not uniform. They were denser in some places, thinner in others, like an imperfect tapestry. One particular strand, woven like a dark vine, seemed to pulse with a faint, almost imperceptible drain on her newfound energy. It was connected to a specific point in the cavern floor below her, a place where the darkness seemed to coalesce into a shimmering, oily pool. That was the focus. That was where the sovereigns were drawing the Whisperwood's essence, funneling it downwards. And that was where the weakest point in her shadowy prison lay. The thought of the Whisperwood's agony spurred her on. She had to break free. Not just for herself, but for every leaf, every root, every creature that called the forest home. She focused her intent on that single, dark strand. She poured her nascent, golden-green light into it, not trying to break it, but to overwhelm it, to flood its dark magic with the sheer, unyielding force of life. A low hum resonated through the cavern, a sound that seemed to come from the very stone itself. The shadowy forms of the sovereigns rippled again, their telepathic voices now laced with a sharper edge of concern. Can you see? Awakens. Reinforce the suppression. One ye. Oh no. But it was too late. The strand, overloaded with the opposing magic of life, began to fray. It didn't snap, but rather dissolved, unraveling into wisps of impotent shadow. As it weakened, the pressure on Elara's spirit lessened, just enough for her to flex her will. With a surge of exhilaration she concentrated, and with a powerful push, she ripped the remaining shadowy threads that bound her. She didn't fall, but rather drifted gently downwards, her feet touching the cold, hard stone of the cavern floor. The oppressive silence was still there, the immense dark still loomed, but she was free of the immediate prison. Fimble zipped around her head, a whirlwind of emerald light, chirping excitedly, its glow now strong enough to illuminate a small circle around them. The cavern was vast, stretching into unseen distances above and around them. The ground was uneven, a landscape of jagged rock formations, ancient stalagmites that looked like petrified fangs reaching up from the earth. And in the center of her illuminated circle, glowing with an unholy, sickly green light, was the pool the sovereigns had created, the nexus where the Whisperwood's life force was being drawn. Wisps of ghostly green energy, like dying fireflies, drifted upwards from its surface, coalescing into the shadowy forms of the sovereigns, making them momentarily more distinct. They were not solid, but seemed to be composed of countless tiny, suffering motes of light trapped within their dark forms. You've broken free of the binding, little one of the sovereign's voices echoed, devoid of inflection, yet carrying a palpable weight of ancient power. A temporary victory. You are still within our domain and the Whisperwood still drains. Elara could feel it. The pain from the forest was still a dull throb in her heart, a constant reminder of the stakes. The green motes within the sovereign's forms were indeed from the Whisperwood, captured and twisted. She had to stop the draining. She had to find a way to sever this connection. She looked around, her eyes scanning the rock formations, the vastness of the cavern. There had to be a way. Fimble, as if reading her thoughts, darted forward, its light casting dancing shadows. It seemed to be pointing towards a passage, a narrow opening almost hidden between two massive crumbling pillars of rock. It was barely visible, a slit in the dark. Is there another way? Elara whispered, her voice feeling small in the immense space. Fimble chirped and bobbed, then zipped towards the opening, clearly indicating it was the path to take. The sovereigns did not immediately follow, their forms still swirling above the draining pool, their attention perhaps momentarily diverted by Elara's unexpected escape. Or perhaps they were simply confident that she could not truly escape their deep domain. With a deep breath, Elara followed Fimble. The passage was indeed narrow, forcing her to turn sideways in places, her hands scraping against the rough, cold stone. The air grew heavier, thick with the scent of damp earth and something else, something ancient and mineral, like the breath of the world itself. Fimble continued to lead, its light occasionally illuminating faint, shimmering veins within the rock, not of gold or silver, but of a dull grayish crystal that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. These were the conduits, he realized, the arteries of this dark realm, carrying the stolen magic. As they delved deeper, the passage opened into a slightly larger chamber, still immense but less vast than the main cavern. This chamber was dominated by a colossal, gnarled tree root, thicker than 100 oaks, that snaked down from the unseen ceiling and burrowed deep into the earth. It was not a root of the whisperwood, but something far older, petrified and ancient, yet radiating a faint, almost imperceptible pulse of dormant power. It was like the skeleton of a forgotten titan. Around the base of this root, carved into the very stone, were intricate, swirling patterns, runes that seemed to writhe and shift in the faint light of Fimble. They hummed with a low, resonant energy, a sound Alara could feel more than hear. These were not the dark runes of the sovereigns, nor the vibrant, organic symbols of the whisperwood. They were something else entirely, predating both, symbols of the earth's own deep magic. What is this place? Alara murmured, her hand reaching out, not quite touching the carved runes. The air around them felt thick, charged with an immense slumbering power. Fimble darted towards a specific spot on the root, a small indentation, almost a hollow. Inside it, nestled as if waiting, was a single, smooth, obsidian-like stone. It was perfectly spherical, and utterly black, absorbing all light, yet Alara felt a strange pull towards it, a faint whisper of connection. It resonated with the primal earth magic of the carved runes. As she reached for it, the chamber itself seemed to awaken. The ancient root pulsed, no longer dormant, but with a slow, heavy beat, like a giant's heart. The runes on the walls glowed with a faint inner luminescence, a deep, earthy brown that shifted to a dark amber. A low, guttural rumble echoed through the chamber, not threatening, but profoundly ancient, as if the very stone was speaking. A heartstone of Kalen, a new voice, deep and resonant, boomed in her mind. It was not the cold, ethereal whisper of the sovereigns, but a voice of solid earth and ancient rock. It has waited for one with the touch of life. Alara's hand trembled as she picked up the obsidian sphere. It was surprisingly warm, radiating a gentle, steady heat that chased away the chill of the cavern. As her fingers closed around it, the sphere pulsed once, then twice, and then its surface began to shimmer, revealing not a solid black, but a depth like looking into a clear night sky, studded with countless miniature, swirling galaxies. It was a fragment of the primordial void, yet imbued with the essence of creation. Her heartstone holds the untamed magic of the deep earth, the ancient voice continued. It can sever what is not meant to be bound, and restore what is unjustly taken. But it demands a price, a balance. What price? Alara asked, her voice hushed, gazing into the depths of the heartstone. Your courage, your conviction, and a true understanding of the intertwined nature of life and earth. Use it to break the sovereign's hold, child of the surface. Use it to awaken the slumbering veins of this world, which they have starved for millennia. Und nennena hesiwaye. Tadhol, anademsia. She looked at Fimble, who zipped around the heartstone, its emerald light dancing with the swirling galaxies within the stone. Fimble seemed to understand, chirping its encouragement. This was it. This was her chance, not just to escape, but to fight back, to truly counter the darkness. Clutching the heartstone, Alara turned and began to retrace her steps, Fimble leading the way, its light strengthened by the heartstone's soft glow. She felt a new surge of power, not her own forest magic, but a raw, unyielding force flowing from the stone, making her feel grounded, strong, and deeply connected to the very bedrock of the world. As they emerged back into the vast main cavern, the sovereigns noticed her immediately. Their forms, still swirling above the draining pool, coalesced further, their telepathic voices now sharp with malice. Heartstone. How did you find it, child? It is not for the living. It chose me, Alara declared, her voice ringing with newfound authority, the heartstone pulsing gently in her hand. And I will use it to free the whisperwood. She lifted the heartstone, holding it aloft. Its internal galaxies swirled faster, and a beam of pure, raw energy, neither light nor shadow, but something entirely fundamental, shot forth from its surface, striking the draining pool. The effect was instantaneous and violent. The sickly green energy of the whisperwood, being siphoned by the sovereigns, recoiled. The dark water of the pool churned and boiled, emitting a piercing shriek that echoed through the vast cavern. The shadowy forms of the sovereigns writhed, their composure shattered. The motes of stolen light within them flickered, some breaking free and dissolving into the surrounding air, like tiny, released spirits. No, Benentile. Their collective mind screamed, a cacophony of ancient rage and fear. You break our hold. You sever the sustenance. Pornyandin. Ilara pressed her advantage. She felt the heartstone guiding her, its ancient wisdom showing her where to direct its power. She didn't try to destroy the sovereigns directly. Instead, she focused on the connection, the magical tether they had cast into the whisperwood. She imagined a great invisible root reaching up from the heartstone, coiling around the dark tendrils that were drawing the forest's life. With a surge of will, she commanded the heartstone, and its raw energy pulsed, strengthening the invisible root. The dark tendrils began to crackle and weaken, struggling against the primordial force of the earth. The screams of the sovereigns intensified, their forms distorting, their power visibly diminishing as their stolen sustenance was choked off. The pain from the whisperwood in Ilara's heart lessened, subtly at first, then more noticeably. It was still there, a deep wound, but the bleeding had stopped. A faint hope, like a tiny shoot pushing through frozen ground, bloomed within her. But the sovereigns were ancient, and their power, though momentarily disrupted, was not easily broken. With a final desperate surge, their forms coalesced into a single, immense vortex of darkness, towering over the cavern. It was a being of pure shadow, its presence radiating an unbearable cold. A profound emptiness that threatened to consume Ilara whole. You may sever the tether, child, but you cannot escape our grasp. This realm is ours. And you and your little spark shall become but another mote in our eternal night. Inentinten. Anentava. Tadeyi. The vortex lunged, an unstoppable wave of darkness. Ilara stood her ground, clutching the heartstone, its light burning fiercely now, a defiant star against the encroaching void. She knew this was not the end of the fight. Severing the tether was one victory, but she was still deep within their domain. She had to find a way not just to stop them, but to truly heal the whisperwood, and perhaps to find a way out of this ancient, suffocating darkness. Fimble zipped in front of her, a tiny emerald shield, its light merging with the heartstone's glow, forming a beacon against the onrushing shadow. Ilara closed her eyes, not in fear, but to focus, to draw every ounce of strength from the heartstone, from Fimble, and from the distant, still whispering heart of the whisperwood. She would not let it be consumed. Not now. Not ever. The shadow crashed into the ethereal barrier Ilara and Fimble had woven. It wasn't a solid thing, but a swirling, suffocating miasma of cold dread and ancient whispers. It hissed with 1,000 forgotten sorrows, each tendril attempting to pierce the shimmering shield. Ilara gasped, the heartstone thrumming violently against her chest, its warmth battling the encroaching chill. Fimble, a furious emerald spark, zipped back and forth, reinforcing weak points in the light, his tiny wings beating a rapid, defiant rhythm. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of decaying leaves and forgotten dreams. Trees around them, already skeletal and brittle, groaned under the pressure, their remaining life force threatening to crumble into dust. Ilara could feel the whisperwood itself struggling, its distant heart a faint, ragged beat against the overwhelming silence of the encroaching darkness. This wasn't merely an attack on a section of the forest, it was a siege on its very soul. It wants to consume the light, Ilara. Fimble chirped, his voice strained. It feeds on fear and despair. We must push it back. Ilara nodded, her eyes still closed, but her inner vision was sharper than any sight. She saw the shadow not as a single entity, but as a vast interconnected network of grief and resentment, a psychic venom that had seeped into the very roots of the world. It had been slumbering perhaps until her arrival, until the heartstone's light had stirred it from its ancient slumber, revealing its true, terrifying scope. She focused, not on fighting the shadow directly, but on strengthening the light within the heartstone. She imagined roots, like those of the mightiest ancient oaks, growing from her own spirit, intertwining with the stone, drawing nourishment from the pure, untainted magic of the living world that still pulsed within her. The heartstone flared, its glow intensifying, pushing back the oppressive gloom by mere inches, but inches that felt like miles. The shadow recoiled slightly, its whispers turning to frustrated snarls. Elara felt a surge of defiant hope. It could be fought. It could be pushed back. But she knew instinctively that this was only a temporary reprieve. To truly heal the Whisperwood, she needed to understand what had birthed this darkness, to find its source, and sever it forever. "Thimble," she whispered, her voice a steady anchor in the storm of shadows. "It's not enough to hold it back. We need to go deeper, to the heart of the corruption." Thimble hesitated. Then his tiny form straightened with resolve. "I'm with you, Elara, to the very last spark." With a shared resolve, Elara opened her eyes. The world was a swirling vortex of shadow and light. She took a deep breath, the heartstone pulsing like a second heart against her ribs. She channeled its energy, not into a defensive shield, but into a beacon, a spear of emerald light that pierced the gloom before them. The shadow shrieked, a sound that grated on the very fabric of existence, and recoiled, creating a narrow, winding path through its suffocating mass. "This way," Elara urged, stepping forward, Thimble hovering protectively beside her. The path they forged was arduous. The air grew colder, heavier, each breath a struggle. The ground beneath their feet became slick with a viscous, inky substance that seemed to leach all color and life from the very earth. The trees they passed were no longer merely brittle. They were petrified husks, their branches gnarled into grotesque, grasping claws, their leaves long since turned to dust. Yet even in this desolation, Elara noticed faint, shimmering motes of light, the last vestiges of the Whisperwood's spirit, clinging desperately to existence. She reached out with her mind, gathering these tiny sparks, drawing them into the heartstone, a silent promise to rekindle their flame. As they delved deeper, the whispers grew louder, more coherent. They were not random sounds but fragments of ancient despair, of betrayal, of forgotten vows. "Lost, forgotten, consumed," they hissed, slithering into Elara's mind, trying to sow seeds of doubt and fear. She pressed on, shielding her thoughts with the heartstone's light, focusing on the distant, struggling beat of the Whisperwood's true heart. They navigated through canyons of shadow, past abyssal pools where no light dared to touch, and over bridges of petrified roots that groaned under their weight. Thimble, ever vigilant, darted ahead, illuminating hidden dangers, his small light a beacon of courage. Finally, they reached a clearing that was unlike any other. It was a vast, circular expanse completely devoid of trees, but dominated by a colossal, skeletal structure that rose like a broken spine towards the unseen sky. It was a ruin, not of stone, but of something organic and ancient, its purpose long forgotten, now merely a monument to decay. At its center, a deep chasm pulsed with an inky, swirling void, the very source of the suffocating darkness. "The Scar of the Weaver," Thimble whispered, his voice trembling. "Legend says it's where the Weaver of Dreams, the ancient guardian of this forest, met its end. Betrayed, it said, its dying agony ripped a hole in the fabric of the world, and from that wound, this darkness seeped." Elara felt a profound sadness. A Weaver of Dreams, an ancient protector, brought low by betrayal. No wonder the darkness was so potent, so infused with sorrow. She approached the chasm, the heartstone throbbing with an almost painful intensity. The whispers here were deafening, a chorus of agony and accusation. Betrayed, forgotten, let it all crumble. She looked into the void. It wasn't just darkness. It was a swirling tapestry of corrupted memories, of shattered promises, of the very essence of despair. She could see glimmers of what it once was, vibrant colors, the joyful dance of forest spirits, the gentle hum of creation. All twisted, poisoned. "It's not just a wound," Elara murmured, her voice resonating with a new understanding. "It's a broken heart. The Whisperwood's heart was shattered here, and the darkness is merely its blood, spilled and festering." As Elara spoke, a faint, shimmering light began to coalesce at the edge of the chasm, just beyond the reach of the inky void. It was a spectral figure, transparent and ethereal, yet undeniably present. It was immense, with flowing, branch-like limbs and eyes that held the wisdom of ages, now clouded with an ancient sorrow. A weaver. You speak truly, child of light. The spectral figure's voice resonated, not with sound, but with a deep, mournful resonance that echoed in Ilara's very soul. My name is Lyra. I am what remains of the Weaver of Dreams, the guardian sworn to protect this sacred wood, and this chasm, is the wound of my betrayal. Lyra's story unfolded in Ilara's mind, a torrent of images and feelings. Centuries ago, a splinter sect of the Whisperwood's own inhabitants, seduced by promises of greater power and immortality, had sought to tap into the Weaver's life force. They believed they could harness its dream-weaving abilities, twist them to their own selfish desires. They had used deceptive magic, disguised as reverence, to lure Lyra to this very spot, then struck. The betrayal had not killed Lyra instantly, but had severed its connection to the heart of the Whisperwood, tearing a rift between the physical and dream realms. Its life force, instead of nourishing the forest, had bled out, creating the scar and giving birth to the suffocating darkness. The sect itself had been consumed by the very power they sought, their twisted souls becoming part of the encroaching gloom. My essence was fragmented, Lyra explained, its spectral form flickering with pain. A part of me was trapped in the dream realm, unable to fully cross over, unable to heal. The other part, my pain and despair, seeped into this world, manifesting as the darkness you see. It feeds on the fading hope of the Whisperwood, growing stronger with every dying spark. But you are still here, Ilara said, looking at the spectral form. A part of you remains. That means there's hope. Lyra's ancient eyes met Ilara's. Hope is a fragile thing, little light-bearer. The only way to heal this wound, to seal the scar, is to reunite my fragmented essence. My spirit trapped in the dream realm must be brought back. But the darkness here is a barrier, and the dream realm itself has been corrupted by my pain. It is a labyrinth of nightmares. Then we will enter the dream realm, Ilara declared, her voice firm. We will find your other self, and bring you whole again. Thimble, though visibly daunted, chirped in agreement. We face shadows before, Ilara. Nightmares are just shadows of a different kind. Lyra looked at the heartstone, its spectral gaze softening. The heartstone. It is a fragment of the Whisperwood's original life force, a seed of pure creation. It is the only thing that can guide you through the corrupted dream realm, and the only thing that can bridge the two halves of my being. But the journey will be perilous. The dream realm, poisoned by my despair, will try to consume you. It will show you your deepest fears, your greatest doubts. It will try to make you give up. I won't, Ilara said, gripping the heartstone. She had faced her own fears, her own doubts, in her journey to reach the Whisperwood. She had to believe she was strong enough now. Lyra nodded, a faint sad smile gracing its spectral lips. Then know this, child. To enter, you must embrace the scar. The darkness itself is the doorway. You must step into the void, and let the heartstone guide your spirit. Ilara took a deep breath, the cold dread of the chasm washing over her. She looked at Thimble, who gave her a reassuring, if slightly wobbly, smile. Be brave, Ilara, he chirped. I'll be right outside holding the light for you. You won't be alone. With a final determined nod, Ilara closed her eyes, clutching the heartstone. She stepped forward, into the swirling, inky abyss. The transition was jarring, a sudden plunge into a world both familiar and utterly alien. Ilara found herself standing on a winding path not of earth, but of shimmering, intangible threads. Around her, the landscape shifted constantly, dissolving and reforming like smoke. This was the corrupted dream realm, a reflection of Lyra's shattered mind. The heartstone pulsed steadily, a warm emerald beacon in the surreal gloom. It illuminated the path, but also revealed the horrors that lurked at the edges. Distorted images of the Whisperwood flickered past, trees weeping sap like tears, flowers with thorns instead of petals, rivers flowing with inky despair. And everywhere the whispers. They were louder here, more insidious, twisting her own thoughts against her. You are not strong enough. You are only a child. You will fail, just like everyone else. Ilara focused, pushing back the intrusive voices. She remembered the warmth of her own home, the love of her family, the simple joy of Thimble's companionship. She drew strength from those memories, letting the Heartstone amplify her resolve. The path grew increasingly challenging. She encountered manifestations of Lyra's despair, towering specters of betrayal, their shadowy hands reaching for her, illusions of her own fears, of being lost and alone forever. At one point, she saw a vision of her own village, consumed by the very darkness she sought to fight, her family trapped within. It was incredibly real, sickeningly vivid. Her heart seized with terror. "This is your future, child. You will bring ruin to all you love." "No," Elara cried out, clutching the Heartstone. "This is not real. It is a lie." She focused on the emerald glow, on the pure, untainted magic within. She remembered the whisper of the wind through the healthy trees, the gentle rustle of leaves, the promise of life. The Heartstone flared, and the illusion of her ruined village dissolved into wisps of smoke. She pressed on, the Heartstone guiding her deeper into the labyrinth. The threads of the path often vanished, requiring her to manifest new ones with her will, fueled by the Heartstone's energy. She learned to trust her intuition, to follow the faint echoes of Lyra's true essence, buried beneath layers of pain. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the path opened into a vast, shimmering chamber. At its center, suspended in a cage of solidified despair, was another spectral figure. It was Lyra, but younger, more vibrant, radiating a gentle creative energy, the weaver of dreams in its prime, but now muted, trapped, its light flickering weakly. "Lyra!" Elara called out, her voice echoing in the dream space. The trapped weaver turned its head slowly, its eyes filled with an ancient weariness. "Another seeker, come to witness my failure?" "No," Elara said, stepping forward. "I've come to free you, to reunite you with your other half, to heal the Whisperwood." She held up the Heartstone, its emerald light bathing the chamber. The trapped Lyra's eyes widened, a flicker of recognition passing through them. The Heartstone, it remembers, a piece of the true heart, but the cage, it is woven from my own despair, my own shattered dreams. You cannot break it. "Not by force," Elara said, remembering the true nature of the darkness, "but by hope, by rekindling the dreams that were shattered." She closed her eyes again, focusing not on battle, but on creation. She channeled the Heartstone's pure energy, not into a destructive force, but into a generative one. She remembered the beauty of the Whisperwood, the vibrant life it once held. She began to weave, not with threads, but with pure light and intention. She imagined the forest teeming with life, the sun filtering through emerald leaves, the joyful songs of birds, the gentle murmur of clear streams. She envisioned Lyra, whole and vibrant, weaving dreams of joy and growth for the forest. The Heartstone pulsed, its light expanding, radiating outwards. The cage of despair began to shimmer, its dark threads unable to withstand the purity of Elara's vision. The whispers of doubt and sorrow in the chamber began to falter, replaced by faint, hopeful melodies. You are reweaving my dreams," the trapped Lyra whispered, its voice gaining strength. "You are reminding me of what I was, what I could be." The cage of despair cracked, then shattered into a million glittering fragments, dissolving into the shimmering air. The trapped Lyra floated free, its light growing brighter, stronger. It looked at Elara, its ancient eyes filled with profound gratitude. "You have done what no one else could," Lyra said, its voice now clear and resonant. "You have brought back my hope. You have rekindled the light within." As the freed Lyra coalesced, it began to expand, its light filling the entire dream chamber. It reached out to Elara, not with hands, but with an enveloping sense of gratitude and immense power. Now it resonated. We must return. We must become whole. With a final powerful pulse from the Heartstone, Elara felt herself being gently pulled from the dream realm. The transition back was far smoother, a gentle ascent from the depths. She opened her eyes, finding herself back at the edge of the scar of the weaver, Thimble hovering anxiously beside her. "Elara, you're back!" he chirped with relief. But before Elara could fully respond, a magnificent light erupted from the chasm. The spectral Lyra, waiting outside, turned, its form shimmering with anticipation. From the depths of the void, a swirling vortex of vibrant, pure dream energy rose, twisting and merging with the waiting spirit. The two halves of Lyra, the physical echo and the dream essence, coalesced into a single radiant being. It was no longer spectral, but a being of living light, immense and awe-inspiring, its form like a colossal, ancient tree, its branches reaching towards the sky, its roots delving deep into the earth. Its eyes, once filled with sorrow, now shone with wisdom and profound peace. The heartstone on Elara's chest thrummed in joyful resonance, as if it recognized a long-lost friend. "I am whole," Lyra's voice echoed, no longer just in Elara's mind, but in the very air, a symphony of creation. "The weaver of dreams lives again." As Lyra's light expanded, the oppressive darkness that had suffocated the scar of the weaver began to recede. It didn't vanish instantly, but it recoiled, shrieking in impotent rage, its tendrils withering under the purifying glow. The inky chasm itself began to close, the scarred earth slowly knitting itself back together, infused with Lyra's healing energy. "The scar is closing," Elara whispered, tears pricking her eyes. The air was growing lighter, cleaner, the heavy dread lifting. "But the Whisperwood is still wounded," Lyra resonated, its gaze sweeping over the blighted landscape. "The darkness has seeped deep into its roots. It needs more than just the closing of the wound. It needs a renewed song of life." Elara understood. She looked at the heartstone, which now glowed with an almost blinding intensity. It was ready. It was brimming with the pure, untainted energy it had absorbed from the healthy parts of the world, from her own hope, and now, from the unified power of the Weaver of Dreams. "The heartstone," Elara said, her voice filled with quiet determination. "It can sing that song?" Lyra nodded. "But it must be planted. It must return to the true heart of the Whisperwood, the nexus of all life within this forest. Only then can its song of healing spread through every root, every branch, every leaf." Elara looked towards the distant, still faint pulse of the Whisperwood's heart. The journey had been long and perilous, but she knew what she had to do. This was the final step. "Fimble," she said, "we're going to plant the heartstone." Fimble, his emerald glow brighter than ever, zipped around her head in agreement. "To the heart of the heartwood, Elara. Let's give it back its song." Guided by Lyra's now clear resonance, Elara and Fimble began their journey back through the recovering Whisperwood. The path was still dark in places, but the oppressive gloom was lifting, replaced by a growing sense of anticipation. Faint tendrils of green were already unfurling on some of the previously petrified trees, pushed forth by Lyra's radiating energy. The whispers of despair were fading, replaced by the gentle rustle of awakening life. They reached the true heart of the Whisperwood, a place Elara had only felt as a distant thrumming. It was a vast, ancient grove, untouched by the deepest corruption, yet still muted, its vibrant life force dimmed by the overarching darkness. At its center stood a colossal, ancient oak, its branches reaching towards the sky like gnarled arms, its bark etched with the stories of millennia taught. But it was dormant, its leaves withered, its power slumbering. This was the nexus, the true heart of the Whisperwood. Elara approached the ancient oak, the heartstone practically vibrating in her hands. She could feel the immense, ancient power within the tree, waiting to be reawakened. Lyra's presence shimmered above them, a benevolent guardian, its energy flowing into Elara, bolstering her own. "It is time, child of light," Lyra resonated. "Place the heartstone into the heartwood. Let its song awaken the forest's own." Elara gently pressed the heartstone against the ancient oak's bark. It didn't just touch, it seemed to merge, sinking into the wood as if it were always meant to be there. A wave of emerald light pulsed outwards from the tree, a gentle humming vibration that spread through the ground, up the trunk, and out into the branches. The effect was instantaneous and breathtaking. A wave of pure emerald light surged from the ancient oak, spreading like a ripple through the entire Whisperwood. It wasn't just light. It was life, pure and vibrant. The withered leaves on the ancient oak unfurled, turning a brilliant shimmering green, then burst into blossoms of every imaginable color, releasing a sweet, intoxicating perfume into the air. The light pulsed outwards, racing through the forest. Where it touched, the petrified trees groaned, not in pain, but in awakening. Their gnarled branches straightened, their bark healed, and fresh, vibrant green leaves erupted from every bough. The inky, viscous ground softened, turning to rich, fertile earth, and wildflowers, dormant for centuries, burst forth in a riot of color. The streams, once choked with despair, began to flow with crystal-clear water, sparkling under the returning light. Birdsong, long silenced, erupted in a joyous chorus, joined by the chittering of squirrels and the rustle of unseen creatures in the undergrowth. The air, once heavy and cold, became warm and fragrant, filled with the sweet scent of new growth and ancient magic. The darkness, unable to withstand this overwhelming tide of life, shrieked one last, dying lament, and then dissolved completely, like mist before the sun. The scars on the land healed, the shadows banished, leaving behind only the vibrant, living tapestry of the Whisperwood. Elara watched, tears streaming down her face, a radiant smile on her lips. The Heartstone, now embedded within the ancient oak, glowed steadily, its light the very heartbeat of the reborn forest. She could feel it, a deep, resonant hum, connecting her to every living thing in the wood. She was no longer just a visitor, she was a part of it. Fimble, overcome with joy, zipped around her, his emerald glow almost indistinguishable from the surrounding light. "We did it, Elara. We did it. The Whisperwood lives." Lyra, the weaver of dreams, descended, its colossal form now radiating pure, creative energy. It was no longer a guardian burdened by sorrow, but a benevolent spirit of endless wonder. "You have not just healed the Whisperwood, little light-bearer," Lyra resonated, its voice a gentle melodic hum that filled Elara's soul with peace. "You have reborn it. You have reminded it of its own song, and awakened its true potential. And in doing so, you have woven a new dream for all of us." Elara felt a profound sense of completion, a warmth spreading through her that was deeper than any physical sensation. The ancient, suffocating darkness was gone. The Whisperwood was vibrant, alive, its magic flowing freely once more. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice soft. Lyra smiled, a radiant, ancient smile. "Now, the Whisperwood will flourish. Its dreams will once again reach out to the world, inspiring beauty and wonder. As for you, Elara, your path is your own. The Heartstone's magic will forever be a part of you. A connection to this sacred place. You are a true guardian of the light." Elara looked at her hands, feeling the faint, lingering warmth of the Heartstone's magic. She had come to the Whisperwood to save it, and in doing so, she had found something profound within herself. She had faced her fears, embraced her strength, and helped to mend a broken world. "Will I always be able to feel the Whisperwood?" she asked. "Always," Lyra affirmed. "Its song will be a part of your own, and should darkness ever threaten again, its song will call to you, and your light will answer." Elara looked at Fimble, who snuggled against her cheek, his tiny body vibrating with happiness. "Thank you, Fimble," she whispered, "for being brave with me." "Always, Elara," he chirped back, a tiny emerald hero. The sun breaking through the now lush canopy, cast dappled light across the forest floor, painting the scene in hues of emerald and gold. The air hummed with magic and life. Elara knew her journey in the Whisperwood was complete, but her adventure had just truly begun. She had found her purpose, a connection to the world she never knew existed, and a courage she never thought she possessed. As the stars began to twinkle through the leaves, Elara lay down beneath the ancient, reawakened oak, the Heartstone's gentle glow a steady comfort. The Whisperwood hummed its lullaby, a symphony of rustling leaves, chirping crickets, and the distant murmur of flowing water. It was a song of peace, of life renewed, of dreams reborn. And as Elara drifted into sleep, she knew with absolute certainty that no matter where her path led, the light of the Whisperwood, and the courage she found within its depths, would always guide her home. The ancient darkness was gone, replaced by an eternal vibrant dawn, and the Whisperwood, once a place of sorrow, now whispered only of hope.